Ashes and oaths. The sky burned. Captain Elias Rourke stood on the shattered roof of what had once been the Chicago Spaceport Control Tower. Now it was just broken steel, scorched glass, and the smell of ash. In every direction, the city lay in ruins, high-rises flattened, streets cracked open, fires still raging days after the Thalrexian bombardment. He tightened the torn bandage around his forearm, ignoring the pain. Around him, scattered survivors picked through debris, their faces smeared with soot and grief. Some cried silently. Others didn't speak at all. The Empire had come not to conquer, but to erase. A distant boom echoed from the remains of the eastern sector. More collapsing buildings. Probably more bodies, too. Elias stepped down into what was left of the comm center, underground and shielded. It had survived the orbital blasts, mostly. Inside, the glow of jury-rig consoles flickered to life as his team worked to bring the systems online. "Signal scanners up," muttered Lin, a comms tech from Musol. "We've intercepted another Thalrexian broadcast." "Play it," Elias said. The room filled with static before a cold, synthesized voice spoke. "The Earth has been pacified. Resistance is crushed. Compliance is the only path to preservation." A silence fell. No one moved. Elias stayed at the speaker like it had spat acid. "Pacified." His voice was low, steady, deadly. "They think we're done." He turned and looked at the cracked walls, the burned faces, the people outside digging through rubble for food and family. No, they weren't done. They were just beginning. He motioned to Dima, the team's lead scavenger. "Did you find the vault?" Dima nodded. The old solar lab under level 3. Still sealed. They made their way down into the forgotten depths of the old science wing beneath the spaceport. The lights buzzed weakly from backup batteries. Inside the vault was a dusty lab filled with schematics, prototypes, and holograms still flickering with decades-old code. "Project Alios," Elias whispered, brushing dust from a glowing interface. The files described a theoretical weapon, one never built, never tested. Not on Earth, anyway. Designed to manipulate stellar magnetic fields, induce coronal mass ejections, even destabilize small stars. A planetary weapon? No, something bigger, something stellar. Elias turned to his team, eyes hard with purpose. "They burned our cities to ash," he said. "We'll burn their stars." For the first time since the bombardment, Lin smiled. Not out of joy, but out of rage. Out of clarity. It wasn't about Earth anymore. This was war, and humanity would not fight fair. Forging the fire. Deep beneath the Rockies, a city of survivors stirred. They called it Bastion, a network of abandoned military bunkers and research facilities wired together with salvage power grids, printed hydroponics, and desperation. No sunlight reached the place, but humanity had never depended on light to fight. They'd learned to see in the dark. Captain Elias Rourke stood in the heart of Bastion's engineering bay, watching a fusion torch carve into a captured Thalrexian core relay. Sparks flew. Alien alloy screamed under human hands. Around him, teams of scientists and mechanics worked without rest, welding, coding, building something the galaxy had never seen before. Project Alios was no longer theory. Using the remnants of old Earth solar physics research and the advanced field control cores from downed Thalrexian drones, they were engineering weapons capable of interfering with a star's magnetic stability. A single Alios device, once deployed near Sun's corona, could trigger a chain reaction, first phase, then instability. In time, collapse. It wasn't a missile. It was a god-killer. "How stable is it?" Elias asked, nodding toward the completed prototype suspended in a containment cradle. Dr. Hannah El-Amin, formerly of the ESA Stellar Weapons Division, looked up from her console. Her eyes were bloodshot, but fierce. "We ran 2 simulations last night. If we deploy this into a system with a young Class G star, we can trigger a superflare strong enough to vaporize any orbital infrastructure, maybe even ignite a premature collapse." Elias let that sink in. "Good. We test it in the Tartarus system." "That's uninhabited," she said. "For now." Underscore 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 underscore. Weeks later, the test ship Echo 1 slipped into the Tartarus system, cloaked in a patchwork stealth field built from Thalrexian wreckage. The Helios prototype was deployed into the upper corona of Tartarus 3, a small sun orbiting nothing of value. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Then the sun pulsed. Brilliant, violent. White fire erupted across its surface as plasma surged out in chaotic arcs, frying nearby sensors and briefly blinding the observation drone. A moment later, the star's luminosity dropped, its equilibrium disturbed. Flames burst unpredictably for hours. If ships or colonies had orbited nearby, they would have been incinerated. It worked. The Empire would never see it coming. Back in Bastion, the news of the success spread quickly. Morale surged. For the first time since Earth fell, people weren't talking about survival. They were talking about payback. They built more Helios devices. Smaller, sleeker, hidden in cargo containers, disguised as satellites. They didn't need ships of war. They needed delivery systems and time. And as Project Helios scaled up, Elias sent a message, encoded in every language known to the Empire, routed through backdoor Thalrexian networks. You turned our skies to fire. Now, we light yours. This isn't rebellion. It's judgment. The Empire didn't respond. But far out in Sector 9, a Thalrexian colony's sun flared violently and went dark. Scorched Empire. The Thalrexian Empire reeled. In less than 2 months, 5 colonial suns had destabilized. 3 flared uncontrollably, wiping out entire orbital shipyards and food processing satellites. 2 dimmed to red, killing the photosynthetic infrastructure of their dependent worlds. Billions of Thalrexians faced famine and darkness. The Imperial Council, once arrogant and unchallenged, now sat in fearful silence as star after star turned against them. No invaders, no armies, just sudden, blinding ruin. And always, the same message. You burned our cities. We burn your stars. Captain Elias Rourke watched the chaos unfold from the command deck of the Nightingale, a retrofitted civilian freighter cloaked in stolen Empire tech. The Resistance no longer operated as scattered cells. They were now a coordinated force. Bastion had become the nexus of something larger than Earth, a resistance spanning solar systems. He turned to his new advisor, Terrian, a reptilian former vassal of the Empire. Terrian's species, the Vorsk, had served the Thalrexians under forced labor for centuries. That changed the day their home star erupted in a human-induced flare that incinerated the Imperial garrison, leaving the Vorsk untouched. The humans had sent no threat, no ultimatum, just freedom wrapped in fire. They fear you, Terrian rasped, not because you strike hard, but because you strike differently. They cannot predict it. They didn't predict Earth would fight, Elias replied. That was their first mistake. All across the Empire, similar stories repeated. Systems long subjugated began to resist. Inspired by Earth's ruthless ingenuity, species once broken by war rediscovered defiance. Thalrexian ships started disappearing, ambushed, hacked, turned against their own fleets. One rebel group broadcast live footage of an entire Thalrexian cruiser being towed into a sun. The message was spreading. Project Helios had evolved. Smaller units, shorter deployment times, even remote activation drones. Humanity no longer needed fleets. They needed opportunities. Supply hubs went dark. Patrol routes collapsed. Trade between core worlds stuttered and failed. The Empire struck back, of course. They raided outer settlements, destroyed entire moons suspected of harboring resistance. But every time they thought they'd crushed the humans, another sun burned. On Bastion's war board, red systems blinked as unstable. By now, nearly a dozen stars had been marked as lost or compromised. And this was just the beginning. Thalrexis Prime, Elias said, pointing to the twin-starred throne world of the Empire. When this burns, their rule ends. Twin stars are hard to crack, Dr. Elamine warned through comms. We'd need 2 Alios payloads, precisely synchronized. Then we build them. We've come this far. Tyrion tilted his head. You would burn the heart of the galaxy. Elias didn't flinch. They left us no heart to spare. Outside the Nightingale, the stars glowed peacefully, but not for long, because humanity had stopped surviving. Now, they were hunting. Twin suns fall. The Nightingale drifted in high orbit over Thalrexis Prime, cloaked in the shadow of its own gravity field. Below, the Empire's capital gleamed across continents, a world of crystalline towers, orbital elevators, and star-harvesting spires. Above, twin suns bathed the planet in golden radiance, symbols of Thalrexian dominance for thousands of years. Captain Elias Rourke stayed out at the twin stars on the viewscreen. Begin final sequence. Inside the cargo bay, 2 Alios Omega devices, humanity's most advanced stellar destabilizers, hummed with barely contained energy. It had taken nearly a year to perfect them. Quantum-linked, remotely synchronized, and stealth-deployed by drone. They were designed for one task: the simultaneous ignition of binary stellar collapse. Dr. Elamine's voice crackled through comms. Devices launched. On trajectory. Detonation in 12 minutes. Tyrion stood beside Elias, his eyes fixed on the glowing twin stars. They are still civilians below. Not all are your enemies. Elias didn't look away. Neither were ours when they burned. The bridge fell silent. Aboard the Nightingale, every crew member watched the timer countdown. Not with glee, but with solemn resolve. Earth cities had been reduced to ash under these same suns. No trial. No terms, just annihilation. Now, justice returned in kind. 10 minutes. The Thalrexian command finally detected the anomaly. Frantic transmissions lit up comms, fleet mobilizations, orbital defense activations, planetary shields raising far too late. 8 minutes. An emergency broadcast from the Thalrexian High Regent filled the airwaves. His voice, once filled with imperial certainty, now trembled. We offer ceasefire. Reparations. Earth will be restored. End this. Elias leaned forward. Play Earth's response. Lynn, seated at the comms terminal, tapped to control. A single message looped back across every Thalrexian frequency, in every tongue. You burned our cities. We burn your stars. 5 minutes. On the view screen, the first sun began to flicker, its corona expanding unnaturally, magnetic fields warping into chaotic spirals. The second followed seconds later, synchronization flawless. Within the Thalrexian capital, the sky changed color. Golden daylight shifted to blood red. Panic exploded. Transports clogged the air. Shield domes shimmered against the rising radiation. 2 minutes. Dr. Elamine whispered, "We're past the point of containment." 1 minute. Tyrion turned away from the window. What happens after this? Elias finally looked at him. The galaxy remembers. The twin stars flared. A blinding pulse of light consumed the screen, outshining everything. Fusion went unstable. Plasma surged outward in furious waves. Orbiting fleets disintegrated. Energy shields overloaded. The surface of Thalrexis Prime ignited in apocalyptic fire. The Empire's heart collapsed, its symbols of power consumed by the very forces it once wielded without mercy. And then, silence. Elias stood in that silence, not in triumph, but in resolve. "We were never the monsters," he said softly. "We just learned from them." He turned away as the stars died behind him. The Nightingale jumped to dark space, and in its wake, the galaxy burned with memory.